Welcome to today's Dad Strong podcast. My name is David from BeDadStrong.com, and today I have a really special guest for you. His name's Cory Bergeron, and he has been on live television for many, many years, sold over 350 products through channels like HSN and QVC. He is one of the most successful salespeople ever on those channels. And he is also known as the All-American Dad on DRTV. And that is probably what he's best known as. And that's really who I get to interview today is Cory as the dad, as the family man. And he shares with us some of the years that most people don't know about. They're the years where he was the full-time stay-at-home dad. He set aside his career to take time and be home with his kids while his wife pursued her dreams of being a musician. So listen to this story as he shares it and as we discuss what it means to be a dad today and his journey of being a stay-at-home dad. I know you're going to absolutely love it. Enjoy. So here's the deal. Most dads today feel stuck, overwhelmed, like a shadow of the man they once were in their primes. And that's not okay. We're taking back the dad flag and creating a movement of men who will be strong leaders for their family, strong physically for their health, strong mentally for their careers, and strong internally for a balanced life. We are Dad Strong, and this podcast is for you. Okay, Cory Bergeron, thank you for being on the Dad Strong podcast. I am super honored to have this interview with you and very grateful to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you allowing me to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, I'd love to start with letting the Dad Strong listeners hear your story about being a stay-at-home dad. I don't think that part of who you are is really talked about too much or really brought out all that much. So I'd love to hear that, what it meant for you or what it was like for you to be a stay-at-home dad, maybe how you got there and some of the challenges that came with that.
Yeah. Well, gosh, it's funny. I've had a lot of success on television, and although positioning me as kind of the all-American dad in TV has worked very well, a lot of people just don't understand why I can speak so intelligently from that point of view, and that is because I spent about 2 years of my life as a stay-at-home dad. Now, that began, I was a television director for a national television network. And I'd had quite a bit of success in this role, but my wife, Elizabeth, is a professional singer, and she had been traveling back and forth to Nashville every few weeks recording in the studio, and her producer up there, Ronnie, who had been a family friend for a long time and certainly had some loyalty to us, Ronnie actually told Elizabeth, listen, I've got a ton of work for you, but I can't keep telling people that you're out of town. You really need to live here. And then I've got all this work I can give you. And, you're a superstar, and your career, of course, will, get these legs, and I'll help produce you. And we'll shoot this thing to the moon. But you and your family have to be up here in Nashville. So Elizabeth came to me and she said, hey, you've had a lot of success in what you've done, but I would really love the opportunity to pursue what I do. So would you be willing to step out of being the guy who brings home the bacon, allow me to be the breadwinner, and move to Nashville with me and become a stay-at-home dad? Now, you have to realize when she asked this question, we had a newborn.
My goodness.
She had been pregnant. She had our son Aiden, our youngest, on June 24th, 2004, and she came to me in August and said, would you be willing? Aiden was only 2 months old, and he was one of 4 children. So, we had Aiden, a newborn, and then we have his older brother Ethan, who was just over a year old, about a year and a half. And then we had their older brother and sister, Danica, who was 5, and Dominic, who was 7 at the time. And what she was asking, it's funny, there was a song that was published at that time called Mr. Mom by a group called Lone Star. It literally became my life. Anyway, we'll get into that in a second. But what I did, I told her, yes, I'd be willing to do this. And she found an investor, and the investor was willing to give us the head start that we needed once we got up there, make sure that we had money to live on, make sure that she had money to record her own songs, that kind of thing. And I stepped out of being a television director where I had, 20 to 30 people on any given day that were obligated to follow my every direction. And I was ultimately responsible for the final broadcast going into 96 million homes. And now I had 4 kids in the house that were not obligated to follow my directions at all. And I had to, they didn't just give their respect. It had to be hard earned. And man, I'll tell you, it absolutely, it flipped everything that I knew about work on its head. It really did. So we sold our house here in Florida, packed up everything we had, moved up to Nashville. Elizabeth immediately, being the amazing networker she is, she got right out there into the music industry and began meeting people and shaking hands. And I went into a town in the middle of winter. We're from Florida, okay? So we're going to Nashville, and it's freezing outside. In the middle of winter, in a townhouse with no backyard. We've got a big dog. We've got 4 kids. I have no support system. I know nobody in town, no friends, nothing. And Elizabeth is going out the door. And of course, the music industry, a lot of the networking that takes place there, it all happens in the evening.
Yeah.
So everybody stays out until 4 o'clock in the morning and then sleeps until noon,
Oh, dear.
Well, oh my gosh. So it was really something else. I had Elizabeth's help after she would get up until she needed to go back out the door again. It was usually right in the middle of the afternoon is when I had her the most. And other than that, it was, she was pumping breast milk and leaving it for me to heat up. And I'm taking children who aren't even on solid food yet. And I had 2 in diapers and I'm changing them simultaneously. By the way, I did get down to the point where I could literally change a diaper in about 15 seconds.
Yes.
I was rocks up, but I didn't start that way. I was a wreck when I started. I would feel like the whole household was coming apart at the seams. Everything was going in a million directions. And that's what brings me back around to that song, Mr. Mom. There's actually the chorus of that song is Pampers melt in a Maytag dryer, crayons go up 1 drawer higher, rewind Barney for the 15th time. Breakfast 6, naps at 9. There's bubble gum in the baby's hair, sweet potatoes in my lazy chair. It's been chaos all day long, and it's only Monday. I'm Mr. Mom. That was it. That was literally it. I had a 1.5-year-old that he was capable of he was the Tasmanian devil. He was capable of creating conflict and chaos everywhere he went, unless he was sitting in front of Thomas the Tank Engine or Barney. There were the only 2 things that would make him sit still. And
oh my goodness.
Incidentally, he could watch those same exact videos on VHS 50 times a day, and it would make him sit still. Well, I'm trying to keep the other 3 kids, keep their lives moving forward. So yes, Barney got rewound 15 times some days. There were days I would go 2 or 3 days at a time and never even change out of my pajamas because
that's your work clothes.
Oh man. I had, so my, that same 1.5-year-old, he was just going for the point of being a cruising toddler where you hold on to stuff and, you can get around on your hands and knees. He was going from that to walking. And as soon as he was able to walk, he was immediately able to climb everything. Yeah. Absolutely everything. I was getting him down off the dining room table. I was getting him down off the stair railing. I was getting him down. He was like an iguana. He wanted to be in the highest place in the room all the time, And he also was incredibly inventive. He is now that boy is a 15-year-old teenager and his mind still moves just as fast.
Yeah.
He is incredibly creative. He would play with anything that was left in his room while he was trying to nap. You could leave a single building block on the floor and he would play with it and not sleep for the entire time he needed to be napping. So we actually came up with a way, and this is a much longer story. I'm compressing it for you.
Sure.
We came up with a way. We put a baby-proof doorknob inside his door. We locked his closet doors shut. We put a monitor in there so we could hear what was going on. And we put a mattress on the floor with a pillow and a blanket, and that was it. There was nothing else in his room.
Literal baby jail.
Literal, right. That's exactly it. Because if there was anything that he could pick up and hold in his hand, it would become a 2-hour toy, and he wouldn't nap. And if that boy didn't nap, the rest of the day was it was chaos for everybody. There was conflict. There was emotional hardship. He would bring the whole household down in flames. He had to nap. Well, what he discovered is that when he slept for an entire night, he woke up in the morning with his diaper completely full of finger paint. And he was fascinated by this. I spent 6 months of my life rolling out of bed at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, walking into his room, and if he was quiet, if he hadn't made any noise whatsoever, there's no way that boy was still asleep. You knew that he had stripped himself naked, pulled off his diaper, taken handfuls of everything that was in his diaper, and painted the walls, his own body, his face, the floor, everything.
Oh my gosh.
In baby poop.
Oh.
I can't even tell you how many days I spent on my hands and knees, day after day after day. I'm telling you, this was my life 5 days out of 7, with a steam cleaner, steam cleaning the rugs, bleaching down the walls, putting him in the bathtub and trying to sterilize my son's body. And he's just smiling and laughing all the way through it, thinking that this is just great, you know? Incidentally, when we moved out of that townhouse, which was a rental, I got every dime back of our deposit money.
That's impressive.
Which tells you how thoroughly I cleaned that place.
That is impressive. Did you ever have to sell one of those steam cleaners on live television? Because you probably would have done it with a lot of conviction.
You know, I did. Yeah, I sold steam cleaners for Bissell. And I did an amazing job selling those steam cleaners.
How could he know that much about the steam cleaner?
Right. This guy really gets it. How does he understand? So, you know, at the same time, I've got my youngest child and he's making a transition. He's at that point in his life where he's saying his first words. He's taking his first steps. He's going from milk to solid food, you know. And when I first became a stay-at-home dad, I couldn't cook for anything. You know, I was the college student. My idea of cooking was still take a can of Hormel chili, dump it into a pot of Velveeta shells and cheese, stir it around, and that's a gourmet meal.
That is.
Right? That's it. Well, my kids were not as interested in that. And so I really applied myself. I tried to learn how to cook great meals, and I got super motivated. I would go down to Publix, and they had those little, you know, the people that would be cooking something at the counter, and they had all the recipes there, and you could buy the ingredients. And I would watch them cook it. I would get the recipe, and I would spend hours in the kitchen putting together what I thought was going to be an awesome meal. And then everyone would just sit down around the table and just look down and just stare at their plate and kind of look up at dad and then look back down at their plate.
Oh, kids are the best critics.
You know, and I figured, okay, I'm going to put best foot forward here. And I would pick up my knife and I would sink it into the piece of chicken breast that I had made, and I would saw and saw and saw and saw, trying to get through the piece of meat. And I'll tell you, I've had dinners where you know, we had a 100-pound golden retriever, and this dog would eat most anything, and I could put my plate on the floor, and he would walk up and sniff it and walk away. I couldn't even get the dog to eat it.
Betrayed by your own best friend.
Oh man! Oh yeah! If the kids weren't harsh enough in their criticism of Dad's cooking, the dog definitely closed the deal. And you know, I'd look at the kids, and I knew we were on an extremely tight budget. You know, we were up there to make things happen, and we needed to watch every penny. And I would still say, "All right, guys, come on, we're starving. Let's go get fast food."
Right.
But But being a stay-at-home dad was the hardest work I've ever done in my life, hands down. When I went back into the workforce, it was like going on vacation every day.
Right. So talk to me about in that season, there's not a lot of dads that in hindsight, they don't get that kind of time to build that kind of relationship with their kids. What is that like for you now that you have, it sounds like you have some teenagers.
I do.
And beyond. What is your relationship like now with them? And how do you correlate that with the I guess the bunker years that you had with them?
Yeah. Well, there's two sides to that. The first side is that I had to figure out for myself who I was and what gave me my best sense of self and was most rewarding to me. Now, there was an immense amount of being a stay-at-home dad that was extremely rewarding to me, and I would never replace in a million years. But I did learn that I am most fulfilled when I'm allowed to be a provider. When I'm allowed to, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Five Love Languages. Are you familiar with this book?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so in there, they really kind of separate people into how they feel love and how they express love most loudly in their own lives. I guess I'm not really doing justice to how to describe it, but it separates people. And what I learned is how I hear that somebody loves me and how I express my love to others is primarily through acts of service. So, there are lots of other ways that you can express love. You can express it by giving gifts. You can express it with words of affirmation. You can express it, by sense of touch and physical contact. But for me, louder than anything was always acts of service. Well, being able to provide for me was an act of service, an unselfish way of me showing my family that I love them.
Yeah.
And that was something that I missed in being a stay-at-home dad. So I will say that when I stepped back into that role, I was more fulfilled. However, the relationships that I cultivated with my children during that chapter of my life, the insight that I had into where they came from and what made them tick. After I was done being a stay-at-home dad, there were two sides to that coin. One was I had to come to grips with the fact that every parent messes up somehow.
Yeah.
We're always in a state of realizing how we messed up and trying to make that better. Like that's just a part of being a parent. No one is a perfect and ideal parent. But owning that and then trying to transform the relationship with your kids and come out on the other side stronger and better and more connected. That was something that happened with my kids and I after I was a stay-at-home dad that was invaluable and would never, being a stay-at-home dad was the catalyst that propelled me into that depth of relationship with my children that I wouldn't have had otherwise. But there was also the connection that came about with my kids because we literally were in the trenches together 7 days a week for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. When I was first a stay-at-home dad, my wife would come back through the door and the house would be flying in 10 different directions. And I would feel like everything's coming apart at the seams and I'm barely hanging on by my fingertips. And she would walk through the door and look over at our oldest son, Dominic, and say, young man, you need to do this. Your father should not have to think about that. Young lady, here's what you need to be doing. She would have the entire house running like a well-oiled machine in 10 minutes. And I would collapse in a chair and look at her wide-eyed and say, how did you just do that? I have no idea how you just did that. That was like a miracle. She became my absolute hands-down hero. She would walk through the door and I would literally sit there and feel like I am a total failure. That's what an expert looks like.
Wow.
And by the end of 2 years, I was never as good as she was because she has a heart that is built to be maternal in a way that I'm not wired for. I'm wired for a lot of other things that are super valuable. She really is the yin to my yang. But I can tell you that I did get a whole lot better at keeping that household running. I ended up being able to walk into an empty pantry and just pull food out of it and throw together a meal that had everybody asking for seconds. There was, I grew an enormous amount during that time, and I grew much, much tighter with my kids. And even to this day, yes, I now have a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 14-year-old. Those are the ages of my children. But I was there when they were literally being molded into who they are today.
Wow.
The highest impact that any parent can have on their child is during the age where they're just absorbing everything and learning how to see their world, learning how to see themselves, learning what they deserve in life, learning their own characteristics and how to process information. All of that is happening to a child before the age of 7. And I was there. I was there during that time for 2 years of that cultivation in those kids' lives. And there's evidence of that every single day when I interact with my kids, regardless of how old they are now.
That's a gift. As hard as it was, it sounds like I'm right there with you. I'm a mostly stay-at-home dad, but also work for myself and from home, which adds just an insane level of craziness to it all. But like even on this podcast, I have 2 kids running around downstairs, and at any moment the door could be kicked down and a flashbang grenade could go into this room. So I am literally on edge the entire time, expecting the worst. So I totally understand the chaos factor. But on the other side of the coin, the reward side of things is I can look in the eyes of my kids and I know them and they know me.
Oh yeah.
And
yes,
their highlight of the day is, Dad, can we wrestle? That's before bed. That's like the big crescendo of the whole day. Can we get that time with you to roll around and wrestle and be physical? And it's just like all of your, all that love, everything that's inside is like, yes, I can't wait for that either. And I don't know if that, at least in this season, I don't know when the season is going to end for me. I'm trying to soak it in as much as I possibly can. It started with my own wife. We moved to Texas from California, away from 100 relatives within 50 miles with our first baby at 2 months. He was 2 months old. And she went into that phase like you were talking about, no support system in a foreign land, no idea. She's a new mom, no idea what to do. And I was gone every day with our car. She had no car. So postpartum depression set in for her really strong and kept its teeth sunk in on her. And I was watching my wife go through this while I'm away and traveling, and it was crazy. But it forced me into this role of how do I support you and how do I get away from my own selfish desires to say, I got to lay everything at the door. Honey, how can I help you today? And I've never dropped that mentality of, how can I be here to assist you? So a question I have for you is, what would you say to dads who maybe they're gone 10 hours a day and their wife's at home with 3 or 4 littles? What kind of support advice can you give to them of ways that just really practical things they can do to help support their wife? And I understand there's the love language side of things. Different wives are going to want to be supported in different ways. They're going to hear love in a different way. But what are a few practical things that you could advise for guys?
Okay. So this is what I would say. The parent who is staying at home with the children is the heartbeat of the household. That is the person who is the glue that's holding it all together. And, and I know this from previous to being a stay-at-home dad, as the providers, as the earners, we may, go off and do our own thing during the day and tell ourselves that somehow, we are that glue. Don't tell yourself that. That's not who you are. You are the person who is enabling the heartbeat of the family. You are the person who is empowering the heartbeat of the family to be there and be that heartbeat, to be that glue. The thing is, the heartbeat of the family, that person who is in that role, they are being sapped of energy all the time.
Right.
The children aren't, children give back in love and affection, but a parent's job is to give of themselves to those kids. And a parent who has been doing that all day long, there's a children's book called How Full Is Your Bucket? I love this book. It talks about every person, has this imaginary bucket over their head. And, there are people that come up and they remove water from that bucket. And then there are other people that come in and they fill water in that bucket. And when the bucket gets completely empty, the person is exhausted and depressed and low on themselves and has a low vision of the world and the people around them. This is what happens when your bucket gets too empty. Well, literally picture a parent as though they're carrying this bucket, and all day long, the kids are saying, oh, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty, and they're dipping into that bucket. Yeah. When you walk through the door after work, whenever that is, and you have been gone, the person who you're walking in on has been giving of themselves, giving energy, being sapped of energy all day long, and it affects their feeling of value and significance, because many times they can just feel like a tool.
Yeah.
They can feel like, everybody is just taking from them and wants from them, but nobody is showing gratitude or giving back, showing them that they're important. As a husband, when you come through the door and that's the role your wife has been in all day long, that wife is utterly responsible for the health of your household. And if your household is not healthy, that affects the lives of every person in it. It affects you being able to walk out that door with your chin held high, breathing freely, and feeling good about the fact that you're going into your workday. It's going to affect your performance throughout the day, as you know the household you'll be walking back into. It's going to affect every one of your children. It's going to affect their desire to be around or be gone as they get to be teenagers. How much do they value time with their parents? Do they seek their parents out, or are they just not interested? A lot of this has to do with the health of your household, and your household is not healthy unless that heartbeat, that stay-at-home parent, feels valued, supported, loved, in not just loved, but adored.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between saying to somebody, I love you, or showing somebody who busts their butt all day long giving to everybody else that you have a deep desire to give back to them, and it's authentic. So if I could say one thing that every person in that role must have, it is to feel as though they are significant, they are valued, and there's an immense amount of gratitude wrapped around for what they do, and not just hear it, but see physical evidence of it so that their bucket can get filled back up, which leads to the health of everyone.
Yeah, that fits in so well with something my wife has told me. She says, the sexiest thing about a man is how good a dad that he is. And I mean, if you, like, as husbands, we get to pursue our wives, right? Like, women want to be pursued, right? That's why every action movie, every great drama, every epic movie, there's a love pursuit. A man is pursuing or rescuing or saving the damsel or the woman. And that's the same type of a story that's written in for us as husbands, especially in this kid scene, in this kid's role, that our wife is giving out. Like, I love that analogy of the bucket. I mean, pouring out every single day, not even pouring out. It's not even willing. And a lot of times it's just, you're getting drained. Every day with these little love vampires. But it's good. It's a good thing. Getting drained every day, but how much as husbands do we have a perspective to say, you know what? I see you. I see what you're going through. And I still see you as a sexy woman that I fell in love with and that I'm growing more in love with every day. How do I pursue you as a husband who wants to date his wife still, who wants to still have that deep relationship of a friendship and all that outside of mom, outside of dad, but as husband and wife. Was there, during those 2 years, was there much of that pursuit for you where you were able to engage in that with your wife? Or was it just like, you know what, we're all hands on deck trying to survive in this season?
So, yes, there was still pursuit in that way, for sure. I believe that people are hungry for different things. Different things fill up their bucket, and everybody has a basic human need for value and significance. And it's easy to lose that when your bucket gets empty, or maybe not lose the fact that you are valuable and significant. But you need to hear it and see evidence of it from the people around you. But what I will say is that it's not just about appearing sexy.
Right.
It's not just about being pursued or continuing to have the dating experience after children or marriage. I think a lot of it comes down to being appreciated for your mind. And it's something that a lot of people miss, I think. I think they see the outside and say, okay, my wife needs to feel beautiful. She needs to feel as though, I still find her sexy and attractive. And sure, all those things are important. But I think in the midst of the stigma of being a stay-at-home parent, it's not considered a role that is, it's not considered a role that you have to have, some kind of formal education for, that
right.
You need to have, a refined ability to process information, that you need to, it doesn't take, and it's unfortunate, but I think there's this stigma, this idea that if you're in that role, then you wouldn't be able to make it in the workplace because your brain just doesn't operate on that level. And that's such a horrible stigma, because it is absolutely the opposite of the truth. I went to college and I got a degree not because I knew that I would use the degree specifically for what I was going to college for, but because it was boot camp for my brain.
Yep.
It taught me how to think. It taught me to be disciplined. It taught me how to process information. I'm telling you that if you want to be emotionally intelligent, if you want to learn to think on your feet, if you want to learn to problem solve with a moment's notice when the stakes are high, be a stay-at-home parent for a year. And it will teach you to process information and think critically in a way that, I'm telling you, it exceeded any college experience I ever had. It exceeded any kind of workplace training I ever received. I came out of that experience so mentally stronger, but at the same time emotionally intelligent in my interpersonal relationships. It was boot camp for your brain. It really was. And I don't think people are appreciated who are in that role to that degree. So one of the things that I learned, from being in that role, and one of the things that my wife has expressed to me as she's been in that role throughout her life, and of course, my wife and I, now that we have teenagers, we actually run our business together. She is my right hand in growing our company. So she's in the workplace now. But one of the things that she expressed to me when she was the stay-at-home parent, and one of the things I felt was, I need to know that I'm recognized for my intelligence and the beauty of how my brain works. That's something that gets overlooked, I think, with parents. We get hung up on the stay-at-home parent needing to feel, in my case, handsome and desirable. Right. In her case, sexy and attractive. Yeah, those things are important. But I think we overlook the fact that they need to feel as though they are smart.
Yeah.
And smart sometimes in a way that other people are not, because they haven't had that experience, and they're admired for that.
Yeah, and on the problem solving side of things, I bet it gave you a different perspective of what a true emergency is. When somebody comes to you with a problem,
No doubt.
like their hair's on fire, and you just kind of blink at them and say, okay, what's your problem? When you've had a toddler who's, maybe almost cut a finger off or is smeared excrement all over the wall, and another one's going in to have a go at it too. And, there's certain things your understanding of emergency completely changes. And I'm sure your ability to, I call it daily triage, we're just constantly triaging. It changes. And I imagine that has affected your ability to especially with your own business, because there's things in there that might seem like this is a super high priority, but after being home with the kids and understanding the different levels of emergency, that totally gets a different perspective put on it. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Yeah. What's really amazing is I was a very successful television director, and the stakes were very high because I worked in television retail. So I worked on a network going into, 97 million homes, and we were selling products, and the most expensive thing we paid for was satellite time. So when you're on the air, every single minute has a dollar amount assigned to it. And if you cannot make that dollar amount, then you're not keeping the lights on, right? There's a minimum. And success is literally measured in thousands of dollars per minute. So as a director, you are the one who is ultimately responsible for how efficiently you're using that satellite time. What is going out on the air? Is it selling the product? Are people buying? There are products out there that, depending upon the time of the day that they were on the air, if they weren't making at least $5,000 or $6,000 a minute, they weren't even considered viable. They had to be tossed out the door. You had to be cultivating that kind of sales every single moment. And you had producers, and you had, C-level executives, and everybody that had, a direct line into that control room. And if you were making mistakes, man, that phone was going to ring. And that's the last thing you wanted to happen. The idea that you could make a single mistake and the network could lose tens of thousands of dollars because you made that mistake. I mean, it was a very high pressure position.
Right.
I left that role. I went and became a stay-at-home dad. I came back to that role. Do you know that 2 years later, after being a stay-at-home dad and not directing any live television, going stone cold for 2 years, when I came back into that role, I was a better director.
Wow.
I stayed calmer and cooler during the entire process. It didn't matter what celebrity was on screen. It didn't matter that I'd been out of touch for 2 years. It didn't matter. My ability to be able to think on my feet, to be able to multitask, and to be able to direct a high stakes, high pressure, high stress situation. I was cool as a cucumber in that chair.
That is amazing, actually. I mean, for you to even be able to see that direct correlation of where you were before, going to be a stay-at-home dad for a couple of years, coming back to it, exact same role, not touching it, and then seeing this is how my stress levels have changed and how I'm able to handle the situation. I mean, I'm sure there's not a lot of people that get to walk through that sort of thing. My dad was he worked for the sheriff's department, and his best friend worked for the fire department. And my mom was a banker, and she would come home and talk about all the different emergencies and the things that are going crazy at her office, and how this person said this and this person's, and it's all, just they're gossip emergencies, which can be the worst. But, my dad and his friend, I just remember this like it was yesterday, are sitting there at the table, and they look at her and they say, "Do you know what a true emergency is?" These are guys who've pulled babies out of burning buildings and been in hostage situations. And they're like, was somebody going to die? Was a building going to collapse on somebody? Was X going to happen where somebody's life is in danger? And she's looking at him like, well, no. He's like, then it's not an emergency. And I think about that as a dad too. I'm like, my kid is screaming through the halls of Macy's or whatever, some situation that is just a social faux pas. And maybe she's not even wearing any clothes, which happened just the other day at the park. And we're sitting there mortified, and people are looking at us, and I'm like, is this a true emergency? Yes, she's 2.5 years old, but it's going to be okay. We got to just take the stress level. Let's move it to a different place. I mean, maybe if I was a first-time parent, there's a lot of first-time parents where every single thing that happens to their kid, it's an emergency, and they have to helicopter and hover and make sure everything's perfect. But man, like you're saying, I mean, you've had 4 at home at the same time, 1 on 4. That's some not good zone defense odds. But you learn to manage it. You learn to, well, like your wife, when she came in, she employed different personnel, right? Hey, you need to be doing this. Don't make your dad do this.
Right. She was, to this day, she's the master delegator.
That's invaluable. We still, we try to do that with our son, and it doesn't quite work.
She didn't see the family as a bunch of kids that she needed to take care of. She sees the family as a unit that takes care of each other. And that was something that, was a shift in my thinking that took me a while into being a stay-at-home dad to kind of stumble upon, and learn that the children are also tools that I have to use to help each other.
Right.
If I know what I'm doing and how to position it correctly. Kind of interesting in that fact.
Yeah. It's a different perspective. We're all moving towards the same goal of staying alive for the day, or, just having peace in our home. So let's flash forward a little bit with the little time we have left. What are you guys doing as a family now? What does a typical day look like for you guys now? I mean, the crazy years of the littles is like all hands on deck every second of every day. What is it like for you now? Give me some light at the end of the tunnel, Cory. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, we all understand that the problems when they're young are smaller and more frequent, and then the problems are bigger and less frequent when they get older. I mean, that's just the way it goes, right? I was talking to a new dad he actually wasn't a dad yet. He was an expecting dad. His child was going to be born within the next 30 days. And I said, hey, listen, a child can only ever have 4 problems, really on any given day. If they're crying, which is their way of talking because they don't have words yet. So they must open their mouth and cry. It's all they know how to do. They're either got a messy diaper, they're hungry, they're tired, or they have gas. That's it. Yep. Those are the only 4 things. If you've got all those bases covered, you've got a happy baby. You would have thought that I handed him this golden how-to manual for his upcoming child. His mind was blown. He's like, are you kidding me?
Genius.
It's that simple? I said, yes, it's that simple. Enjoy your child. It's not going to be as hard as you think, when they're young, and you'll learn from each other as it goes on. So yes, how many times a day does your child have one of those 4 problems? Oh, every 30 minutes. One of those is coming around. Right? So the problems are smaller. Well, as they grow and they become teenagers, obviously the problems become bigger, So now I have a 22-year-old Dominic who is living just outside of Seattle in Tacoma. And he's going to school up there. He's heavily involved in politics. He's really carved out his own place in the world and is following his own path. And, I was only in his life for 2 years as the stay-at-home parent. I really must look to my wife and she really is the master. Yeah. She's unbelievable. It's one of the reasons I was so drawn to her. When my wife and I were married, my 2 older children were my stepkids. She already had those 2 children from a former marriage. I became their stepdad. Well, I eventually adopted them, and they now carry my last name, and I've been in their lives since they were 2 and 4 years old. So I'm really the only dad that they've ever known. And, but I got a chance to see my wife in action as a mother, and it was awesome to me. It was one of the biggest catalysts that led to my proposal. I was so drawn to her because of the outstanding and insightful mother that she was. And when I look at Dominic and I see his drive and, how self-aware he is, how well he knows himself, and how intelligent he is, emotionally intelligent when it comes to how he interprets his world, I really must just kneel in front of my wife and call her the master. She's Unbelievable. So Dominic is now doing that, but he and I, he was the oldest when I was a stay-at-home dad. And in that, when there was conflict between myself and the kids, when we would just not see eye to eye, Dominic was the one who was most outspoken about it. Dominic is an incredibly intelligent child. And of course, the more brilliant your child is, the further they just want to push the boundaries of everything, which is a blessing and a curse,
Right.
So Dominic and I, after I was a stay-at-home dad, we had to spend some time. We had an awesome connection for me being a stay-at-home dad, and an intimate connection, but I also had some repair work to do on our relationship because he was the one that was pushing the boundaries, and I was the one that was not yet capable of maintaining, where those boundaries were and really managing them well.
Right.
I was too new to it. So, yes, there is an intimacy there, but there was also some repair work I had to do as a dad. And I had to go to Dominic, and there were some things I had to apologize for. In that, after the fact, we definitely had a deeper relationship than I think we ever could have had otherwise. But Dominic is doing amazing things. And when we jump on the phone together and chat, which we do on a regular basis, there is this warmth and this connection and this intimacy there that I never could have had otherwise.
That's so good.
It is. Now, my daughter, Danica, who is 20 years old, she is now actively employed by my company. She is my executive assistant. She is extremely driven to be an entrepreneur. She's had an idea that she has been refining for 2 years as to what her own business will look like. And she is super hungry to just be off my elbow and be on top of every email, every meeting, every phone conversation. She just wants to be there and just continue to absorb and learn everything that I know so that she can move forward with that in her own life and her own pursuits. That kind of, I'm so immensely proud of her. And there is this daddy-daughter relationship that is, wow. A little girl attains almost all of her self-esteem from her father. A lot of families don't know that when it comes to how a little girl learns to feel about herself, how valuable she is, how she deserves to be treated by other men, all of that comes from the dad. And my daughter, I look at who she is now. I look at the fact that she has always been extremely critical of any man she has allowed into her life.
Good.
I look at the fact that she knows her value, and she knows that is not given away freely or cheaply. That she feels extremely empowered and strong she feels like she can tackle anything in this world and make it her own. When I look at the woman that she is, it is one of the loudest pats on my back that I could possibly feel from any of my children. The evidence is so loud and strong there that I must have done it right at some point.
Yeah.
And I know that in being a stay-at-home dad, that connection that I cultivated with her that then carried on to the rest of our relationship together for years, just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Wow.
And then my two younger boys, my gosh, I've been there since the very beginning in a very intimate way. And to this day, my teenagers will go out and hang out with their friends, but all I have to do is say, hey, you guys, you want to throw a ball? And they're all over it. Neither of them have played Little League in 7 or 8 years, but we can still go out there in the yard and throw a ball.
Yeah.
I can still say, hey, you guys, can I play your video game with you? And they're like, oh, yeah, come on, Dad, come sit in. They have never, ever gotten to a point in their lives where they are too cool for their dad. They are happy to introduce me to every one of their friends. They are happy to involve me in any of their activities. They are happy to make me an active part of their lives all the time. And that's awesome because I see that breakdown in a lot of, parent-child relationships, especially in the teenage years. And sure, teenagers come with conflict. They want to be more and more independent, and they're kind of on the threshold of that. They haven't quite gotten that independence yet, but boy, they feel ready for it, and so they're hungry for it. And there are some boundaries there that get pushed, and there's some conflict, and that I think that just always happens. But regardless of all that, the fact that my boys seek me out and are hungry for me to be a part of their lives and welcome me into any part of their life at any time without restriction, that's incredible for me. And I credit that back to those first years when they learned that I was a person that they were close to and could count on.
Yeah, and it sounds like there has not been this pent-up resentment through their lives where they see dad as, a hypocrite, or he's one way in this scenario, but he's not that way at home. And, to your credit, you've kept that Cory the same wherever you are. And I think, our kids are so stinking perceptive.
Oh, yeah.
That if they see you, let's say you're at church and you're this one pastor guy who loves everybody, and then at home you're screaming your head off at your kids and angry with them all the time. They're like, I don't understand you. You're not safe. But from everything that you're describing with how your kids are interacting with each other and with you, it just sounds like the open lines of communication have been there. And something you had said earlier with with the eldest son is that you've had to go back and apologize. And that is like one of the most understated things I've heard from any dad that I've ever interviewed, is this idea of repenting with your kids and saying, I am sorry, I screwed up. And repairing that wound in them, where like, man, I felt so wronged. I don't necessarily want to say something. And then the dad comes in and initiates that. Like, I guess talk to me for a second about how forgiveness and how being able to get before your kids and apologize, like, how did that come about? Was that something that you saw as a kid and that you saw modeled, or is it just something you learned through being a stay-at-home dad?
It is something that I experienced when I was a kid, and I reflected back on. If you want to impact your children's lives in a profound way, if you want to institute change, not just temporary change, but change in perspective that they will carry forward and will literally alter the course of how they feel and think about their world. If you want to do that for your kids, own your failures. In their eyes, openly and vulnerably, own your failures. Because kids, I think that there's this idea that parents need to be the captain of the ship. And I've heard it said that as the captain of the ship, when the ship is going down and it's sprung a leak and it's taking on water and people are piling into the lifeboats, but there's not enough lifeboats and there's too many people and everything's failing and death is inevitable. When nobody knows what to do, when even the captain doesn't know what to do, the captain always knows what to do. Right? So that has been said to me when it comes to being a CEO of a company, which I am, right? But what I think that is a yesteryear idea. I think that is the the man walking through the front door of the house, right, and the children have bathed and changed their clothes, and the wife is standing there with a martini in her hand, waiting to welcome them, the hero home. I think that it is an idea that is as outdated as that. Yeah. I think that we're smarter than that now. And I think that a lot of people don't, there's an ego involved and pride involved in making sure that I am the captain and I always know what I'm doing, right? No. If you want to profoundly affect your kids, let them know in loud and vulnerable and obvious ways that you're in this together. Yeah. And you don't do that by being the all-powerful, captain of the ship. You do that by admitting your failures and teaching them that it's okay to do the same. and showing them that you don't have all the answers, but it is so important to you that you both participate in figuring it out together, and that your journey together will be one of mutual growth, and that you're learning as much as they are sometimes. When there is that kind of open communication back and forth between a parent and a child, when a parent bravely pulls down, their wall of authority and comes down and kneels next to their child and gives them a hug and says, you know what? I'm really sorry that I did that, because in retrospect, I didn't have any right to do that.
Yeah.
You didn't deserve it. And as right as I thought it was in the moment, I've had time to think about it, and I understand that it wasn't. And I want to apologize to you for that. And I want you to know that it's on my radar now, and I will pay attention to that particular thing, whatever it is. When a child hears that, oh my gosh, the kind of respect it cultivates for the parent, because there's no child in the world that is ever going to reach teenage years and believe that their parent is still superhuman. The mistakes we make are absolutely too numerous, right?
Too frequent.
Right. There's no way they're going to still be under that belief. So if you try and enforce your will on a child without letting them know that you will vulnerably own your mistakes and that you're in it together, then that's just going to breed resentment.
Yeah.
Right. So admitting your failures, extremely powerful way of making sure that your children respect when you do have to lay down the law, when you do have to be a parent and give some direction and you need it to be followed. They will respect you so much more if they have felt 10 times that amount of love, and if they have seen you be vulnerable and admit your failures. They are much more willing to follow a person like that than they are willing to follow a dictator. So, and I reflect back on a time in my life. I was a very mouthy teenager. I was. Oh, man. My poor parents. I can't even tell you as an adult how many times I've apologized to them for the way I was when I was a teenager. I was a very mouthy teenager, and my mother was a person who would never allow anyone to see her cry. If anything was upsetting my mother, she would go off into the bathroom door would close, and she'd be in there for a little while, and she'd come out, and you'd never know. She would never show it. And I remember my mother was at the washer and dryer doing the laundry. And incidentally, at this time, my family didn't have a lot of money. So my mother was actually washing towels for a friend of ours who was a professional masseuse. And she was washing these towels to make extra money. Mm-hmm. My mother washed the towels. She did a paper route of 200 papers 7 days a week. She did anything she could to bring in extra money to help the family while my father was out working. He was a bricklayer. And there was, we all worked together. I mowed lawns in the summer, and some of the money that I brought home, I donated to the family to help pay for groceries and help get, clothes for us and that kind of stuff. So we were all in it together. But I was an extremely mouthy teenager, and there's my mom, unselfishly folding towels to earn extra money to help support our family. And I don't know what I said behind her. I can't even remember that. But I was 16 years old. I had a driver's license. I was getting ready to go out the door. And she stopped and hunched her shoulders, and I saw her shake. And no one in my family ever saw my mother cry. Mm. And after a moment, I'm standing there waiting for her to answer, and she turns around with tears streaming down her cheeks. And she says, "Do you hate me?" Oh my gosh, this is the most unselfish woman who provides so much. And I felt like a lightning bolt hit me in the heart. And I said, "What?" And she said, "You speak to me as though you hate me."
Wow.
And forget it. I was leveled. Yeah. My world came to a stop because my mother allowed herself to be vulnerable and show me her authentic feelings in a way that I just didn't get to see very often from my mom. And it changed everything from that day forward for me. You want to talk about a radical traumatic moment that changes the entire shift of your trajectory? That was one for me. And I've had moments like that with my own kids where I've gone to them and I've been vulnerable and I've said, I was wrong. That never should have happened. And I am so sorry. And let's work together on how we can ensure that that situation never takes place again. I'm in this with you. Please help me to learn. And oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful tool.
It is. And it's a tool that's irrespective of your personality. Because some would say, "Oh, Cory, that's just your personality. You're more of a feeler like that," or whatever. But saying and apologizing and admitting your fault is something that any personality can do. You might do it with different words, but getting down to their level and admitting that you screwed up and asking them for forgiveness is something that is like, it's, as an emotionally healthy adult, it's something you need to model, and it's something that you need to practice even in your own marriage. And that might be harder than with your kids, but it's a really good thing to do. And as a CEO of a company, I mean, you can totally correlate that into a company, because you're not building a regiment with a company. You're really building a family where everybody's working together.
That's right.
So I imagine that gets employed with what you do as a CEO as well, even though you do have family members working with you.
It definitely does. We have a much bigger team than just my family, and we're all, I own a video production company, and we produce premium video for people selling products online. And every one of those videos, when we initiate a project, we're all going into the trenches together.
Yeah.
Everybody has a job. They know what they need to do, but we are working together as a unit to create something beautiful and compelling for every one of our clients. And that doesn't happen without having that kind of intimate give and take. Every person in those trenches all need to believe in each other. And that kind of vulnerability inspires that in the people around you. And it makes them want to do their best work.
Yeah. Well, the pressure's off, right? If they see you modeling that you're perfect all the time, you never make a mistake, you always know what you're doing, you're always decisive. I mean, then they think, I have to be that way, even though I'm not. And they make a lot more mistakes than the pressure was off, and they knew they were on a team, right? So
I think it also shows an unwillingness to grow and learn from somebody who acts that way. And, somebody who's unwilling to grow and learn is a leader that you can only follow for a short time.
Yeah, off a cliff most of the time.
Yeah.
So you have pitchvideo.com? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So if anybody, there's several entrepreneurs who listen to the Dad Strong podcast. Let's say there's an entrepreneur out there who they just got a physical product. I just met a gentleman the other day, actually, who has what is it? It's like a new deodorant applicator. And he's wanting to get some video done. He had no idea how to do that. So if there's a gentleman like that who's watching, and he wants to show people how to use a product, he wants to have compelling social media product video out there, how would he do that? And where would he go to get something like that done?
Well, he can just go straight to pitchvideo.com. There's plenty there to see. Our whole website is actually being redesigned right now. So there will be a newer, sleeker, more modern, more beautiful, more comprehensive website on the way. But right now, pitchvideo.com is still loaded with content, plenty of great stuff there. You can see plenty of examples of our work, and there is a consultation form on there. And if you fill out that consultation form, it will advance it straight to not only my staff, but it will copy me on that email. And if you put in there that this is a result of the Dad Strong podcast that I'm a part of right now, then I will respond back to you personally.
Oh, awesome. That is very generous of you, Cory. Thank you for doing that. I hope anybody who has a product out there or is desiring to do something like that would definitely reach out to Cory. I've seen his work. It is phenomenal. I've heard him speak, and just his understanding of how to present your product as if it's his own is extremely compelling. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that, guys. Pitchvideo.com. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up, Cory. Any other last points you want to leave with dads? I mean, you've just absolutely, completely over-delivered am what I was expecting in this podcast. So I really appreciate all the very practical things that men can take, have different perspectives on, and move forward as a healthy dad to raise healthy and powerful children in a healthy home. So thank you for that. Is there any other resources you want to point dads to? I know the 5 love languages is one that you mentioned. Any other top books that you would recommend for a dad who's hungry to learn and grow as a parent?
There are a couple of books that I've read over time that I think were just really transformatory for me. But I do want to come back to the love languages because it's best if the test in there is very, very simple to discover what your love languages are. And I would recommend that you give that test to every person in the family, because I can not only tell you what my love languages are and how I hear love the loudest and express love the loudest, but I can also tell you for every other member of my family. I can tell you what all of my kids' love languages are and how my wife experiences it. I can give that to you, and it has changed the way that we treat each other. I know that if I want my son, Ethan, to hear I love you, it's going to be completely different than the way I express it to my daughter or my wife. I can't use the same methods. And having that personal understanding was huge in our household. And to this day, every person in our family knows the love languages of every other person. So I would highly recommend that.
That's awesome. And just real quick, that's not a tool to say, well, this is how I need to be loved. You need to love me this way. It's a tool to give love and to help others, because love doesn't seek its own. It's not something that's like, well, I selfishly need X. It's for others. It's for you to see the love of that, how other people receive it, and to dote that on them. And then when they see how you receive love, they give it. But it's not for you to demand it, right? That's, again, going back to this authoritarian dictatorship stuff that we talked about earlier.
Right.
But yeah, what a beautiful and powerful tool to know everybody and they feel known as a family. Like that's, I mean, yes. You can't buy that. Money can't buy that sort of a thing. So, okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Cory, again, so much for taking the time to be on here and pouring out your heart, sharing, opening up your life to us. You're just, we appreciate you as a member here at Dad Strong. And thank you again for who you are as dad and the example that you get to be.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me today. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to reach out and connect with other dads because, it is, there's a brotherhood there, and being able to connect this way, it just does good things to my heart. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening to this podcast. I am so grateful you got to hear what we just went through. And if you love what you just heard, come join us over at bedadstrong.com and grab yourself some swag, grab a hat, a shirt, sport the brand that is helping dads be strong for their families, changing the world one household at a time. Thanks again for listening, and hope to see you over at bedadstrong.com.